One of the best gifts that we can give ourselves is time. Time to pause, time to be quiet, and time to be still. It sounds great, right? Meditation calms the mind and soothes the body. If it wasn't for all of those random thoughts that keep filling our minds the moment we sit down to meditate. For today's episode, I'm joined by Meryl Arnett, who knows the language of silence and has been leading thousands through meditation on her wildly popular podcast, The Mindful Minute. If you've been thinking of starting a meditation practice or you're struggling to maintain the practice that you have, this episode is for you. But first, could I ask you a favor? Could you hit subscribe and even leave me a review? This is what lets the podcast platform know that this is a show worth listening to, and it will then share it with more women looking for help on their midlife journey. The icing on the cake would be if you could also share this podcast with your friends. Our greatest strength comes from the community that we are growing. Now buckle up. This is going to be a fun ride. This is the Roller Coaster Podcast. We are here to help you be empowered and renew your sense of purpose as a midlife mom. This is your time to redefine and reclaim your power as a woman. Just because our kids are getting older doesn't mean that our lives still don't have crazy twists, turns, ups and downs. And that's not to mention what our hormones are doing. We're navigating helping our kids plan their next chapters while quietly wondering, what the heck does my next chapter look like? My name is Lucy Q, wife, mom, podcaster, and journaling mentor. This is a crazy time in your life, but you are not alone. So I'm inviting you to throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
This is the Roller Coaster of Midlife, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. And today, I'm inviting you to take a soothing detour off the adrenaline-pumping tracks of midlife and to find the calm in the chaos and tap into a force so powerful, your inner knowing. My guest today is a woman who knows the language of silence like no other, Meryl Arnett, an inspiring mother, an unwavering advocate of nature, and a manifesto of mindfulness. Meryl is a soothing voice behind the Mindful Minute, one of the top 10 meditation podcasts and the 5th most shared podcast of 2022. With her meditation classes making waves on platforms like CNN, Today.com, and Atlanta Magazine, she has been a beacon of tranquility for thousands since 2010. Welcome, Meryl.
Lucy, thank you so much for having me.
I started meditating, I'm going to say I seriously started meditating like on a regular basis, probably about 4 years ago. And I just, I found it was on, I subscribed to the Gaia channel, and it was an Mani Padme Hum chant. And for some reason, It just really resonated to me. So that was sort of my go-to thing. And I find, for me in midlife, it just brings down the calm, and it's helped me a lot. What's your journey into meditation, and how has this become such an important part of your life?
Well, my journey hit me, you know how in your late 20s, you have your own version of like an early life crisis where you've done college and you're becoming an adult and you realize you have no idea what it means to be an adult or what you're supposed to do with your life. That's when I started meditating. I was having
so you're early to it.
I came early to it. I was early.
In my late 20s, I was a mother. I had my first at 26. I had my second at 29. I was a mother, but I still had no clue what I was doing.
That's so funny. So
Probably
I became a mom
should have
in
started
my 30s.
meditating then.
So I was sort of in this place of like, am I going to become a mother? Am I going to have children? What is my job going to look like? I was trying to figure all of these pieces out. And I I think for the first time, it really felt very unmoored. Yeah, I just wasn't sure what the path forward was. And as I was getting married, I signed up. This is so silly. I signed up for a yoga and Pilates boot camp. Like, let me get fit and cute for my wedding dress. And I walked into this 6 a.m. yoga class, first yoga class I'd ever taken. And I got on the mat, and somewhere about halfway through, clear as day, I heard a voice say, "You are going to teach this one day." And I was like, okay, thank you for giving me a sign, because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Thank you. And I took all the yoga classes. A couple years later, I signed up for a teacher training and I became a yoga teacher. So then I'm teaching yoga, and all of a sudden, everybody thinks I can teach meditation because I teach yoga. And I didn't learn how to meditate. I wasn't meditating. I was still in that place of like searching and questioning and trying to figure things out. And I kept getting this question about, can you teach me to meditate? And I thought, well, gosh, I better figure this out. And so I signed up for a meditation teacher, not a meditation teacher training, but a meditation training. And I did 5 days, and I left that training thinking, I have no idea how to meditate. I can't do it. All I do is think. I didn't understand a word this person said to me. And so I spent the next couple of years really trying to figure it out. I went to all the teachers. I tried several different styles of meditation. And ultimately, it was Tara Brach, who was my very first teacher. And the words she used around what happens when we meditate, it was the first time it made sense for me. And I was so grateful for it. And at the same time, I thought, it should not have been this hard to find the right teacher. It should not have been this hard for me to understand that everything I have tried in the last several years was right. I was not wrong. I was doing everything right. I just felt like I was doing it wrong. And so I really set out at that point to offer meditation teachings in the way that I hope feel incredibly accessible and enjoyable, as opposed to making you feel like it has to be this way. I have to feel like this. I have to look like this. Otherwise, I'm not doing it right. And that's been my path the last, I guess, 13 years at this point.
Wow, that's incredible. And I understand where you're coming from, where you feel that you're not doing it right. Because I had tried meditation in the past, but again, you feel like, am I sitting the right way? Am I holding my hands the right way? Am I doing this? And it's not until I went to a class where, I don't want to call it a class, it was a meditation session, but she was using crystal bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Fell in love with those. And
Mm.
we were actually sitting in, those zero gravity lawn chairs, that they swing
Yes.
back. She had all of those. So you're in there, you're in the dark, you get a blanket. And I'm like, if this is meditating, I could do
Yep.
this. But
Yeah.
I still find, I still find it hard to settle my brain down because my brain's always going. Yet I brought my husband to a couple of the crystal ball meditations, and he's like, within 30 seconds, I was on the beach walking. And I'm like, that's not fair.
I
I
want
do
to do
this all the
that.
time. This isn't fair. But I also realize, we're sitting on the sofa watching TV, and I'll say, what are you thinking about? And he's like, I'm not thinking about anything.
Mm.
I'm like, how can your brain be empty? But I think that's a trait of us women, is that
Oh,
our
yeah.
brains are always full of stuff. So how can we make the transition into, or is there anything we can do to make that transition into meditation easier and quiet down that voice so that we can really tune in?
Yeah. There are 2 comments I want to make. The first of which is those crystal bowl experiences, any experience we have where it feels elevated in some way, like there is that sense of really spectacular peacefulness, is so incredible. And it's not required for a meditation experience. It doesn't mean you can't also sit at home amidst the noise and the clutter and whatever else is happening, and also have a transformative experience. I think one really feeds the other, right? They sort of elevate each other. You have these sort of experiences that feel a bit bigger and richer and more spacious, almost like a vacation. But we also look for those experiences in our lives as they are, without needing to be in a spa all the time. And then the other piece of that is you're 100% right. Like, it's so, as you were talking, I was like, yeah, every night we go to sleep, my husband is asleep in half a second. And it takes me a whole process to let go of the day and stop the ruminating and fall asleep, right? I think the biggest thing we can do for ourselves as thinkers, which, let's take a minute to say, good job us, our brains are working. That's what they're designed to do. The thing that we don't have to do is have a whole big conversation with ourselves about how we're doing a bad job. Right? The minute we sit down to meditate and those thoughts are tick, 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 what naturally happens is there's a piece of our brain that goes, look at you failing at meditation, just like everything else you're failing at in your life. Way to be terrible, right? And we're beating ourselves up. And then you're like, oh, I don't have time for this. I got to go return the thing to the store anyway. And so you stop and you get up and you leave and you walk away thinking you can't meditate. When the truth is, almost all of us sit down and think, right? Every time I close my eyes to meditate, I start by planning something. I'm planning what I'm going to buy at the grocery store, what I'm going to cook for dinner, when I'm going to write that next email. The difference is, at some point I figured out I don't have to have a whole big thing around the fact that I'm doing that. I can absolutely just notice, here I am planning again. Okay. And I wait for that next breath. And somewhere along the way of the practice, as long as I don't get up, it quiets down. Right? But if I start to be like, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to think, shh, stop, no, right? Then it just prolongs that experience. I get more agitated instead of being able to sort of relax back away from those thoughts.
Yeah, and it takes practice, because that inner critic, that voice just loves to pop up. Anytime and every time it finds a little gap in our thinking, it's going to poke its head up and criticize us. So definitely learning how to get that under control is a key piece, I found. But it's still like your brain, at least for me, your brain kind of goes down these weird paths. It does, like you say, it does find this silence at some point in time, because like I said, I listen to a recorded one. So when it's up, and there's sometimes that you're like, whoa, wait a second, I feel like it just started. And other times you're like, oh, this feels like an hour.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. How long is that recording? How long is your practice for usually? Is
It's 10 minutes? Yeah.
10 minutes. So I have found that it takes me almost 10 minutes to get quiet. And one of my favorite tips for people that are looking to start going a little bit deeper is just start adding 1 minute at a time and look for that magic tipping point. Somewhere around 10, 11 minutes, usually, you'll find that you kind of drop. It's not that you stop thinking, but it's that they become the background noise instead of the thoughts being the foreground, right? It's like they drop back just a touch. And there's a sense almost of space between you and your thoughts. And that's the place that, to me, is the magic of the practice. That's the place where we're like, right, I don't have to identify so much with the thoughts. And actually, I get to choose which thoughts I'm going to think about and which ones I'm going to say, not today. One of the gifts I found in my practice is, as I said, I noticed every time I meditated, I was planning something without fail. That was my thing. Some people will find they daydream or fantasize. Some people will find they rehash something that's already happened. You could plan, you could draft emails in your head, right? We all have the thing that we tend to do. But what I noticed was I was also doing that when I was driving my kids to school. And I was also doing that when I was folding laundry. And I was also doing that when I was quote unquote relaxing on the couch watching a TV show. I was still planning, thinking. And so I never actually felt that relaxed. Same when we go to bed, right? We don't feel like we got a good night's sleep because there's a part of our brain that's still doing the thing it always does. But once you notice, oh, I always do this, and I have planned that grocery list 5 times already, it's written. I don't have to think about it again. I could just let that piece go. We start to create a little bit of freedom for ourselves.
So what does actually happen to our brain and our bodies when we fall into that sweet spot of meditation?
Well, physiologically, our body moves into a rest and relaxation state. So that piece of our nervous system is the part of our nervous system that says, you're safe. You could relax or fall asleep and be okay. And so our heart rate tends to lower. Our breath will get a little bit more shallow because it's like the breath of sleep almost. Our blood pressure drops. Sometimes your body cools off, so you feel like your body temperature dropping a little bit. And in our brain, what we're doing is within 8 weeks of a practice, if you do 8 weeks, 10 minutes a day, studies have already shown with brain scans that your brain changes. And we're creating these different neural pathways in our brain. So let's say you are somebody that struggles with high anxiety and you tend to go down the path of worry all day long, right? And every time we sit and practice, you notice, here I am worrying about the next thing that's going to happen. And I start to really pay attention to that and invite in that sense of spaciousness. I'm starting to feel that in my practice and realize I don't have, like, that thing is already planned, or it's going to happen the way it happens. I don't have to worry so much. Well, now I'm creating this new pathway in my brain. Rather than going down the path of worry, I'm going down the path of trust. That path be prevalent path for me. And then even when I'm not meditating, that tends to be where my mind goes versus back down that path of worry that I've done for the last 20, 30, 40 years. So it's pretty incredible the changes that happen in our practice.
Ride.
I remember one of the darkest days of my life, the day I hit rock bottom. When I went searching for answers on how to get myself out of that dark place, I discovered journaling. But when I tried to put pen to paper, I didn't know where to start. I had no guide or method to help me express what I was feeling. The only thing that I had was the blank page of my journal staring back at me. It took me years to figure out the proper journaling method so that I could understand who I was, what I wanted, how I thought, and how I felt. That is why I've taken everything that I've learned and turned it into a guide that will not only help you start your journaling journey, but will also help you start each day with purpose and gratitude. This guide is filled with growth tools, personal resources, and guided journal entries that will help you understand who you are, what you want, what you're thinking, and what you're feeling. You can find your journaling journey, your guide to starting each day with purpose and gratitude, on Amazon, and check out the show notes for links. Order your journaling journey today and discover your true self.
Ride.
I don't even think I can find the right words to describe how I think it's changed me. But I know it has.
You know, that's actually almost verbatim what every single student says at some point to me is, I don't know that I could tell you why or how, but I absolutely know it matters that I do this practice. I think that's so interesting.
But it's almost like, do we need a reason? Besides, I
do
feel
we
good.
have, right. I mean, can't that be enough? That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Can it be enough to trust your own inner experience? This is doing something for me. Great. I don't have to have a name for it. I call it awakening. That's what I call it, awakening.
Well, and I think over time, I think that's what it does. I heard somebody describe meditation. They said, prayer as is us talking to God. Meditation is us listening to God.
I love that.
And God is whatever you frame it, doesn't necessarily have to relate to any one religion. But it's those, and sometimes it happens in meditation. And then sometimes it happens after meditation. But you have new thoughts, new way of thinking, a revelation. You feel closer to something that you know is more than just yourself.
Mm. We know inside, we know we feel connected. We're awake. There's wisdom. And it's interesting when we practice. I agree with you. Sometimes I feel in my practice like, oh, I had a moment of insight or clarity. And more often than not, it's after my practice. It's somewhere later in the day, but there is for sure a deeper sense of trusting myself and being willing to listen to the nudges that I feel or receive or perceive in my day. I'm much more willing to be open to that versus plowing through my day without taking a second to breathe or think and just, doing to do. I'm much more inclined to take a breath, to wait, to listen until I feel like I know this is the next step. This is the next thing.
Yeah, I definitely can see that for myself, that I'm definitely, since meditating, you take more pause.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I find it easier to say, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to let that bother me.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
And you know what else is interesting? And I'm curious if you've had the same experience. It's not that I don't still have moments where I get mad. It's not that I don't have moments where I feel stressed or anxious or overwhelmed even. But what feels different to me is how I feel about that experience, right? So I might be mad, but I don't necessarily feel that that is making a statement about my goodness or badness in the world or how I am as a mother or a partner or as a community member. It feels like a passing emotion, a normal human emotion that I'm able to relate to and acknowledge and let it move through me, as opposed to making it become this big mountain that I have to use to define me or shame me or become this huge thing, when it's just an emotion, right? Meditation doesn't mean we're always going to be peaceful all the time, but I do think it means that we will likely be very kind to ourselves all the time.
I've also found that, I don't know if this is just solely from, a meditation practice or just sort of the whole spiritual awakening, but I find that I see myself more as what I consider my human self, my spiritual self. So I can sit there and, my spiritual self can say, okay, well, your human self is doing it for these reasons. And then when your human self is doing some dumbass stuff, you're like, okay, spiritual self, can you help me out?
Please
Throw me a
help.
line. But I think with meditation, I think that does give you the gift to be able to step out from yourself and reflect on the situation. And it's just like, that's my human behavior. That's fine. That's normal. It's a choice. I'm going to choose to do something else.
Yeah, it's a choice. I mean, that's the biggest statement you can possibly make. I think the very best quote that sums up meditation comes from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor and a psychotherapist. And he wrote a book called
I was going to say he was the guy that wrote the book, and he helped a bunch of other people in Auschwitz get through.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And in that book, he wrote, I'm going to paraphrase, this isn't verbatim, but the essence of the quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a pause. And in the pause lies your freedom and your power. In the pause is the choice, right? The thing happens and we're going to respond. And in between those two, there is space. That's what a meditation practice teaches us. 100% is how to connect to the space so that we have complete choice, complete freedom to choose how we move through each of the moments in our day. It's a huge game changer.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Does it matter what time of day or when in our schedule we meditate? I've heard some people say, oh, you're supposed to do it first thing when you wake up, when you're still sleepy. But then I've heard people say, like, do it in, like, does it matter?
Well, I have meditated at all times of day. As you know, I started quite early in my life. So I meditated through having little babies, which meant I meditated in nap windows. And sometimes I meditated at night when I was lying next to them, waiting for them to fall asleep. Now I meditate first thing in the morning. I have meditated all over the place. I think it all works. I am not a fan of anybody telling you that you have to do it a certain way. So the very best time you can possibly meditate is the time that you can be consistent and show up for yourself. So I would way rather you looked at your day and said, you know what? I always have space at 1:00 in the afternoon. Amazing. That is your meditation window. Sit at 1:00. In my personal experience, I find that first thing in the morning, I haven't gotten into all the thinking of the day yet. So I tend to have a quieter meditation experience, but it all works. It is all beneficial. The best thing you can do for yourself is commit to consistency. 5 minutes, 5 days a week is way better than an hour once a day. I mean, an hour once a month or once a week, right? You want as frequently in terms of 5 days a week or 7 days a week, as consistent as possible, even if that means the duration has to be shorter.
Yeah, for me, I get up, my morning is I get up, I do my journaling and then the meditation. Because I find that journaling, it kind of gets, you can unload some of the junk out of your mind. So it does kind of help settle the brain a little bit more. And like you said, if you do it in the morning before stuff started to happen, sure, you're still, I'm going to admit, you're still pre-planning the day, trying to figure out what you got to get done, what you're going to have for dinner. But I do find it's calmer.
Yes.
I'm not as good putting it in later in the day because I just feel like I'm not in the right mode, let's say. But in the morning,
how I feel
it's
as
just
well.
that.
But also, I'm guessing you're a morning person. I'm a morning person. Like, I have no problem getting up.
Kids did that.
You don't say that. That's so funny.
No, my kid. Well, I was always a morning person, but our oldest, when he was a baby, he was like a 5 a.m. kid. So my mornings became even more earlier. And you just kind of get into that.
Yeah.
It's just not, that just becomes who you are. But then again, I say that by 8 o'clock, I'm like, yeah, let's just go relax upstairs in bed.
Same. Same. But if you're listening and you're like, oh, well, I stay up till 2:00 in the morning every morning because I'm a night owl, you might have a totally different, quiet, spacious experience late in the evening.
Yeah.
I would fall asleep instantly, but you might not, right? And so a piece of it is knowing yourself, where your energy is, and what is going to feel best for you in your day.
So there is really no wrong way to meditate except for not doing it.
Yes, I'm going to say yes to that question.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know, because everyone seems to have rules. You have to breathe like this. You have to sit up straight. You have to do this. I'm like, dang, we got enough rules.
There's so many rules. And the last thing I want is for meditation to become another thing that you have to do, another
Good
thing
point.
to check off the to-do list. My hope for you is that meditation feels like the one thing you get to do for yourself. I want it to feel like the ultimate 10-minute, 5-minute, 20-minute luxury of your day. Because maybe that's the only 5, 10, 20 minutes that you get to sit down and be still and not have to fix anything or plan anything or change anything It is your moment to just be. And we all deserve that. It's so rare. So when we can approach our practice in that way, it's not to be a better person. It's not to magically change every broken thing in your life. It is for you to learn how to be with yourself in this moment. It's incredible, even when it's uncomfortable. And sometimes it is.
Meryl, I was about to ask you for your final words of wisdom, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you just shared them with us. That was perfect.
That sounds about right.
That was awesome. That was awesome. But I will, if you did have anything else to share, because you have courses and classes, don't you?
I do. Yeah. So I teach a live virtual Monday night meditation class, which also becomes my podcast. So it's record and months later it's released out on the podcast, which is called the Mindful Minute. And then once a year, actually coming up in August of this year, I do a meditation teacher training. So that is for anybody who is looking to share meditation with others, whether that's your kids or your community group or your classroom or, wherever it is that you might teach. So yeah, we have a teacher training coming up. I'm really excited about it.
And for the teacher training, do you have to have any certain level of meditation experience for that? Or is it just...
So what I ask is that you have had a dedicated meditation practice for at least 6 months. And all that means is you try to practice. For at least 6 months, you have explored meditation. You don't have to be great at it. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be in silence. But I do want you to have explored a practice for yourself so that you come in knowing what works for you, knowing where you struggle, knowing what you don't know, so that we can really build on that and create the foundation. This training, the work that I do in the training, is to give you the foundational elements that make up a meditation so that then you can create the words you most need to hear. When I teach meditation, I'm saying exactly what I need to hear in a practice to have a deep experience. And I want you to be able to find that for yourself. So that's the work we do in the training.
Oh, I like the sounds of that. I like the sounds of that.
Mhm.
Now, if you're interested in connecting with Meryl and learning more about her teacher training course, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of the links in there. And my goal for the Roller Coaster of Midlife is to empower women like you to thrive in this amazing chapter of our lives. So go on, embrace the adventure, and start rocking midlife like the badass that you are. If you've enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review and share it with your friends, because our greatest power is in our community. And don't forget to visit my website, therollercoasterpodcast.com, and click on Start Here. And this is where you can get your free audio course, 3 steps to go from hot mess to badass and start rocking midlife. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep riding the roller coaster and embracing the adventure of midlife. I'd like to thank all of my listeners. And Meryl, thank you so much for joining me today.
Lucy, this was so much fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster.